Welcome, dreamers. Tonight, let the waves carry you into a story of mist and mystery. Close your eyes and imagine the soft creak of a ship's hull, the whisper of fog against your skin, and the steady gaze of a captain steering her crew into the unknown. Drift with us now, as we sail through shadowed waters where secrets stir beneath the waves. Let the rhythm of the sea guide you into peaceful slumber. As the tale of Captain Miriel unfolds, it was a night for secrets. The stars hid behind a cloak of clouds, and the moon herself seemed unwilling to shine her light upon the wandering storm. A battered but determined vessel cutting through the obsidian waters. Captain Miriel stood at the bow, her gaze steady, as she surveyed the vast, unbroken horizon. Beneath her, the ship creaked and groaned, as if whispering its own fears to the night. The crew behind her was silent, every eye fixed upon her back, hoping she knew a way through the strange fog that clung to them like a shroud. The mist had appeared suddenly, thick and unyielding, an endless stretch of grey that swallowed the familiar stars and turned the ocean into an endless, depthless void. They should have turned back. Every sailor knew the legends of these waters, knew the stories that had been whispered from one generation to the next. But the stories had only fueled Miriel's curiosity. And tonight, the pull of those myths was stronger than ever. She had heard of a place where the sea itself was alive, a shifting, sentient thing that lay in wait for those reckless enough to seek it. The sea dragon's lair, they called it, the resting place of a dragon so ancient that even the waves whispered its name. They said it guarded a hoard of gold and treasures, lost to the depths, treasures from ships that had vanished without a trace, their wealth swallowed by the deep. But no one who ventured close had ever returned, and those who had glimpsed it from afar spoke of eyes as old as time, watching from beneath the waves. Miriel felt the weight of those eyes upon her now. A low, uneasy murmur drifted among the crew, their breaths clouding in the cool night air. They were hardened men and women, pirates who had faced storms, naval battles, and the unyielding hand of fate. But tonight, a fear lingered that no blade could fight, no ship could outrun. Some muttered prayers to gods they hadn't spoken to in years. Others simply gripped the wood of the ship, as if by holding fast they could steady their souls. The mist thickened, closing in around them, until even the lanterns on the ship's stern became nothing more than dull smudges of yellow. Silence, deep and pressing, settled over the ship. No wind stirred, no wave slapped against the hull. Even the sea had fallen silent, as if awaiting something. Miriel knew they had crossed a threshold, a boundary between the world they knew and something else, something older, darker, and unfathomably vast. Her heart beat steady and slow, each thud a promise to herself that she would see this journey through, no matter the cost. For she was not here merely for gold or glory. No, there was something deeper in her heart, a restless pull she had never been able to shake. The dragon's hoard called to her, yes, but it was more than the treasure. She sought something intangible, something beyond the riches of the earth. A voice from the mist seemed to echo her thoughts. Or was it merely the creak of the ship, the faint cry of a distant bird? But no bird would fly in such a place, nor would any wave break the stillness of this unnatural calm. She turned, glancing at the pale faces of her crew, each pair of eyes a question waiting to be answered. She could feel their doubt, their fear, but she had nothing to give them, no reassurances to ease their worry. And then she saw it, a shadow beneath the water, vast and slow-moving, its shape barely discernible through the haze. Her heart quickened, but she kept her expression unreadable, steady. The shadow was not close enough to make out its form, but she felt its presence, sensed the weight of ancient power in the water below. "Captain," her first mate Edric whispered, his voice breaking the silence. "We should turn back. This place, it isn't natural." Miriel didn't look at him. "There is no turning back," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She felt the pull of the hoard, the allure of that promise whispering to her from the depths. This was why they had come, why she had led them all here. The shadow shifted, growing larger, as if whatever lay beneath the waves was rising toward them, drawn by their presence. The silence grew heavier, almost alive, pressing down upon them with an invisible weight. Miriel felt the cold reach of fear slipping into her bones, but she did not flinch. "We sail forward," she said, her voice steady and unyielding. "Into the mist, until we find what waits." And as she spoke, the shadow vanished, leaving only the quiet pulse of the ocean, a heartbeat beneath their feet. The mist tightened around them, binding them to the path they had chosen, drawing them closer to the depths, and to whatever ancient eyes watched them from below. With the last deep breath, Miriel stepped back from the bow, her hand resting on the hilt of her cutlass. She could feel the pull of fate in the air, thick and undeniable, and she knew that there was no turning back. For somewhere beneath them, the sea dragon stirred, and its hoard, its legacy, awaited. And as the ship slipped further into the mist, a strange thought crossed her mind, as though whispered from the depths themselves. The call of the dragon's hoard was not one of gold, but of secrets, secrets that could bind her soul or break it. By dawn, the mist had given way to a cold silvery light, and the outline of a forgotten island loomed before them, rising like a jagged scar upon the sea. Black stone jutted out of the water, wet and sharp as daggers, and the shore was a wild maze of shadowed rock and tangled vines. The island was small and desolate, an oddity in these endless waters. a lone piece of land surrounded by nothing but stories. The crew lowered anchor, their voices hushed, and rowed ashore. Each footfall on the sand felt like a trespass, as though they were stepping into the grave of a long-lost kingdom. Muriel led the way, her gaze drawn to the heart of the island, where twisted trees rose like skeletal hands reaching toward a grey, uncaring sky. As they made their way inland, the air grew thick, heavy, with the scent of salt and something else. A metallic tang that clung to the back of their throats. It was the smell of old secrets and forgotten things. Muriel's heart beat with a fierce determination, though she felt the weight of the island pressing against her, as if challenging her to turn back. The crew moved in silence, their eyes darting between the strange shapes of the trees and the black stones that lined the path. Some among them muttered nervously, clutching amulets or pieces of cloth as if to ward off the unknown. The fear in their eyes reflected the same question. Was the hoard worth the danger that seemed to pulse from the very ground beneath their feet? At last they came to a clearing, and there, at its center, lay a sight that stole their breath. Before them was a mound of gold, jewels and artifacts unlike anything they had ever seen. Broken swords, tarnished goblets, and precious gems gleamed in the dim light, scattered among the bones of men who had sought this treasure long ago and failed to claim it. It was a hoard worthy of a king, a dragon's trove of lost wealth. Muriel's hand tightened around her cutlass as she took it all in. This was no ordinary treasure. It was an invitation, a lure laid out for those reckless enough to think they could claim it. She felt the pull of the gold, the whisper of power that it promised. But somewhere deep inside, a voice cautioned her. This was not just wealth. It was a test, a trap, a reminder of every soul that had been lured to ruin by the dragon's hoard. The crew approached the pile with a mix of awe and fear, their eyes reflecting the shimmering light of rubies and emeralds. One of them, a wiry young sailor named Thomas, reached out a trembling hand to touch a golden cup encrusted with dark, ancient stones. As his fingers brushed the metal, a cold wind swept through the clearing, cutting through them like a blade. "Stop!" Muriel's voice sliced through the silence. "This is no place for greedy hands." Thomas froze, his eyes wide with fear, but she saw the hunger in his gaze. She understood it. She felt it too, a desire that went beyond reason. But she knew with the strange certainty of those standing on the edge of fate that the dragon's hoard was not something one could simply take. This was a treasure guarded by more than just tales and bones. Then, as if in response to her warning, the ground began to tremble, a deep rumbling that resonated from the heart of the island. The hoard itself seemed to shift, as if the gold were alive, breathing, watching. Muriel took a step back, her hand on her sword. though she knew it would be useless against what lay beneath the earth. The ground split open, and from it, an enormous shape rose. The sea dragon emerged, its scales glinting a sickly green and silver in the morning light, eyes the color of storm clouds and centuries of wrath. Its head was crowned with coral and barnacles, and its body shimmered with a translucent gleam like water given form. The dragon's gaze fell upon them, and the air grew thick with its presence, each breath heavy with a knowledge as ancient as the sea. "Who dares disturb my rest?" The dragon's voice was a thunderous whisper, as if spoken by the waves themselves. Its gaze fell on each of them in turn, and the crew shrank back, the color draining from their faces, all except Muriel, who held her ground, meeting the dragon's gaze with defiance laced with awe. "We come seeking passage, not plunder," she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of the dragon's gaze probing her very soul. "I would trade, not steal." The dragon's eyes narrowed, a glint of curiosity mingling with its scorn. "You seek a hoard that does not belong to you, and yet you would call it a trade." It laughed, a low rumble that shook the ground beneath them. "To gain my trust, Captain, you must give me something more valuable than gold." Muriel felt the eyes of her crew upon her, the question unspoken in the air. She did not flinch. "Name your price," she replied, though a chill ran through her as she awaited the dragon's demand. The dragon tilted its massive head, its gaze unfathomable. "Something dear to you, something that binds you to this world," it said, its voice a whisper that held the weight of centuries. "If you would have my trust, Captain, you must give up what you hold closest to your heart." The words hung in the air, a command that echoed through her bones. She felt the depth of the dragon's demand, a sacrifice that would strip her of something irreplaceable. Her hand moved unconsciously to her neck, to the delicate chain that held her most cherished possession. She had carried it all these years, a relic of a life she had left behind, a symbol of love that had long since faded into the past. The dragon's eyes gleamed as though it sensed her thoughts. "Choose wisely, Captain," it murmured, "for the sea does not forget." And with that, the dragon sank back into the ground, leaving the crew trembling in its wake. The clearing fell silent once more, but the challenge remained, lingering in the cold, salt-laden air. Muriel's heart pounded as she turned to face her crew, knowing that the true test had only just begun. Captain Muriel stood in the quiet aftermath, the dragon's words echoing in her mind. "Something dear to you." It had spoken with the finality of a riddle whose answer carried the weight of fate itself. She felt the intensity of the dragon's demand settling over her, pressing down like the dark water of the deep sea, binding her to a choice she had not anticipated. Her crew watched her with wide, uncertain eyes, still gripped by the memory of the dragon's gaze. For a moment, Muriel allowed herself to look back, her thoughts lingering on the many things she held dear. Her ship, the loyal, battered, wandering storm, which had carried her through countless battles and storms. Her crew, each soul a unique story, a vital thread in the tapestry of her life. And then there was her compass, that precious silver disc that guided her through the darkest of nights, a relic handed down through her family. It held the memory of her bloodline, the map to every land she had dreamed of reaching. But she knew in the quiet honesty of her heart that none of these were the answer the dragon sought. These were things of her trade, possessions that held her loyalties and ambitions. They were bound to her, yes, but they did not hold her heart. Her fingers drifted to her neck, to the chain she wore under her shirt, hidden from sight. Suspended from it was a small tarnished ring, unassuming, almost plain, but to her it was everything. It was the last remnant of her former life, the life she had abandoned when she took to the seas. The ring was a token of love lost, a promise she had once cherished and then forsaken for the call of freedom, the call of the waves. No one knew of the ring. She had never spoken of it, never shown it to a soul. She wore it close to her heart, where its weight was a quiet reminder of choices made and paths left behind. She thought of the person it had belonged to, of a time when she had dreamed of a simple life, far removed from the dangers and glories of piracy. The memory stirred in her, gentle but fierce, and for a moment she felt her resolve waver. Could she part with this last fragment of herself, the one piece of her heart that still belonged to a world beyond the sea? But the dragon's demand was clear. She knew that to hesitate would be to lose its trust forever, to forfeit the hoard and the hidden wisdom she sensed within its depths. And Muriel was not a woman who turned away from the unknown. She would not be remembered as a captain who feared to venture where others had faltered. With a deep breath, she unclasped the chain, the ring slipping into her hand. The metal was cool, familiar, and somehow heavier than it had ever felt. The weight of her memories pressed down upon her, mingling with the salty breeze that swept through the clearing. She closed her eyes, holding the ring tightly, whispering a silent farewell to the life it had represented, to the love it had signified. Then, with a gesture both fierce and fragile, she held the ring up, offering it to the air, to the unseen eyes that she felt watching her from the depths. "This," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my heart." As if in answer, the earth beneath her trembled, a faint rumble that stirred the bones and gold scattered in the hoard. The dragon's shape began to emerge again from the ground, not in anger, but in a solemn silence, as if acknowledging her offering. It rose, massive and magnificent, its scales glistening with an unnatural light, its eyes locked on the ring in her hand. The dragon lowered its head, its gaze ancient and unfathomable, filled with an understanding that transcended words. Slowly, it extended a single vast claw, steady and deliberate, as if handling something delicate and precious. Miriel opened her hand, releasing the ring, watching as it dropped into the dragon's claw, a small fragile thing in the grip of a creature as timeless as the sea. For a moment, they stood in silence, captain and dragon, mortal and myth, bound by the weight of a single unspoken promise. The dragon's gaze lingered on her, as though it were searching her soul, examining the depth of her sacrifice. Then it spoke, its voice softer, a whisper that carried the authority of tides and storms. "Your heart is true, Captain. You have given me that which you cannot reclaim. In return, I shall grant you a piece of my wisdom, a gift from the depths." Miriel felt a rush of power wash over her, an energy that filled her veins, as if she had touched the very essence of the ocean. Images flashed through her mind, maps of hidden seas, paths known only to creatures of the deep, and secrets whispered by the waves themselves. She understood in that moment that she had been given something far greater than gold, something that would guide her to the farthest reaches of the world. The dragon's gaze softened, almost kind. "You may go, Captain," it said, its voice like the slow rolling of distant thunder. "But know this, the sea has claimed a part of you today. You are bound to it now, in ways you may not yet understand." And with that, the dragon withdrew, sinking back into the earth, leaving the clearing as still and silent as it had been before. The ring was gone, her heart with it, but in its place there was a new knowledge, a strength that had been whispered into her soul by a creature of ancient lore. Miriel turned to her crew, her expression unreadable, but her eyes gleaming with the secrets of the sea. They looked to her in awe, sensing the change, the transformation that had occurred. She had paid the price demanded, and in doing so, she had earned the dragon's trust. "Back to the ship," she commanded, her voice steady and fierce. She would carry this new power forward, though she knew it would haunt her, a bond with the depths that could never be severed. As they made their way back to the wandering storm, the crew fell silent once more, casting glances at their captain, sensing the truth. They were no longer led by just a pirate. They were led by a soul touched by the wisdom of the sea itself, a captain whose heart was now bound to the ancient, endless depths. Captain Miriel stood at the bow of the wandering storm, her gaze fixed on the horizon, though her thoughts were elsewhere, lost to the weight of what she had given. The ring, a piece of her heart, and a tether to the world she had left behind, was now gone, swallowed by the dragon's claw. The memory of her sacrifice lingered, an ache that pulsed within her chest, more real than the salt-laden wind or the creak of the ship beneath her feet. She had gained something powerful, yes, a knowledge that hummed in her veins like the pull of the tides. But it had come at a cost. She was only beginning to understand. The crew sensed the change in her. They moved with careful steps, whispering in the shadows, watching her as if she were no longer of their world. And in truth, she wasn't. Not entirely. She had become something else, something that lay on the border between the known and the forgotten, a being shaped by sacrifice and bound to the mysteries of the deep. Night fell swiftly, drawing a shroud of stars over the ship as it drifted away from the island, leaving behind the dragon's hoard and the silent shore. Yet Miriel felt as though the dragon's gaze still followed her, its ancient eyes lingering on her with a strange, knowing intensity. She felt the power of her gift settling within her, a knowledge that would guide her far beyond the seas she had known, into places charted only in the dreams of sailors. The crew gathered around her in the dim light of the lanterns, their faces cast in shadows. They were waiting, drawn to her by a force they could not name, bound by loyalty and awe. Miriel let the silence linger, feeling the weight of their questions, the unspoken words that hovered in the air. At last, she turned to face them, her voice a low murmur that carried through the night. "We have gained the dragon's trust," she began, her words as steady as the tides. "But in doing so, we have entered into a bond with the sea itself. We carry with us a piece of its wisdom, a map that will lead us to treasures beyond gold, to the very heart of the world's mysteries." Her words held them spellbound, each of them drawn to the promise of what lay beyond. Yet as she spoke, Miriel felt the weight of her own sacrifice pressing down upon her. The silent, unbreakable bond she had forged with the dragon and the depths it guarded. This was no ordinary journey, no simple adventure. It was a path that would carry them far from the shores they knew, into places few had ever seen. One of the crew, a grizzled sailor named Bram, stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the faint glimmer of starlight. "Captain," he said, his voice rough but steady, "what did you give to the dragon? What price did it ask of you?" Miriel's fingers drifted to the empty space at her neck, where the chain had once rested. She felt the hollow ache of loss, a wound that could never truly heal. But her gaze remained steady as she answered, her voice softened by a truth she could no longer hide. "I gave the dragon my heart," she said simply. "A piece of myself I can never reclaim." The crew fell silent, each of them feeling the weight of her words, sensing the depth of her sacrifice. They knew she had given more than a mere trinket, more than a token of sentiment. She had given something vital, something that had bound her to the land and to her past. And in doing so, she had become something else. A captain with the sea's wisdom, a soul touched by the ancient magic of the dragon's lair. The night deepened, and with it, A strange quiet settled over the ship. Muriel remained at the bow, her thoughts a tangled weave of past and present, bound by memories she could no longer carry. She felt the pull of the sea, a low hum that resonated through her bones, guiding her forward into the unknown. As the hours passed, she began to see visions in the water, images that flickered and danced like shadows upon the waves. She saw islands shrouded in mist, caves filled with glimmering crystals, and oceans that stretched far beyond the edge of any map. She felt the knowledge seeping into her mind, a gift from the dragon that promised untold wonders but carried with it an undeniable danger. The compass at her side began to spin, the needle flickering between directions. As if caught in a silent conversation with the forces unseen, she felt its energy drawing her onward, a pull that went beyond mere navigation. It was a calling, a summons from the sea itself, urging her to places yet uncharted. A shiver ran through her as she realized what it truly meant. The dragon had not simply granted her wisdom, it had bound her to its domain. She was now a vessel of the sea's secrets, a keeper of its mysteries. She would be forever drawn to the water, to the places where its power lay hidden, to the tides and currents that shaped the world. And as she stood upon the deck, gazing into the endless night, she knew she could never turn back. The life she had known was gone, replaced by a destiny as vast and unfathomable as the ocean itself. In the silence of that starlit night, Captain Muriel felt a bittersweet resolve settle over her heart. She had become a part of the dragon's world, a piece of the sea's eternal story. And though she was haunted by the memory of what she had lost, she knew that her journey was only beginning. The ocean stretched before her, boundless and eternal, filled with the secrets of ages past. With a final glance at the horizon, she whispered a silent vow to the depths, a promise to carry forth the dragon's wisdom, to follow the pull of the tides, and to honor the sacrifice that had bound her to the sea. For she was no longer just a captain. She was a soul touched by the mysteries of the deep, a pirate who had given her heart to the endless, unfathomable ocean. The days passed like shadows slipping over the waves, and yet the feeling of time grew strange and elastic aboard the wandering storm. Captain Muriel had become something of a myth among her own crew, a figure cloaked in quiet power, her eyes touched with the depths of 1,000 unseen places. The crew could sense it, that she no longer belonged to them alone. She had become part of something older and more eternal, bound to the sea's secrets in ways that defied understanding. They sailed farther than they had ever dreamed, guided by the strange visions that now haunted the captain. She spoke little of what she saw, yet the crew could see the change in her eyes each time she glimpsed a distant shore or a glimmering cave in the dark water. Muriel seemed to know, instinctively, where to go. her hand guiding the compass that now spun in patterns that only she understood. They followed her without question, for there was a new certainty in her movements, a knowledge that surpassed human wisdom. As the ship drifted deeper into the unknown, the nights grew longer, stretching into something eternal and mysterious. The stars seemed brighter, hanging low over the water, watching them with silent, ancient eyes. Each night, as the crew lay restless in their hammocks, they could feel a presence around them, a hum in the water, a pulse beneath the ship. They sensed the dragon's lingering gaze, as if it were watching from beneath the waves, guarding the path it had set for them. One night, as they sailed under a sky thick with stars, Muriel felt a new stirring in her soul. She stood alone at the bow, gazing into the vastness, the silence of the night settling over her like a cloak. The memories of her sacrifice flickered through her mind. The ring, the love she had given up, the life she had once imagined. A pang of longing tugged at her heart, a feeling as deep and unrelenting as the sea itself. It was then that she noticed a faint glow in the distance, a shimmer on the water, like moonlight refracted through a crystal. The sight drew her forward, and the glow grew brighter, shifting and swirling as if alive. She knew, with the same unshakable certainty that had guided her ever since the dragon's test, that this was where the dragon's wisdom had led her. The crew gathered behind her, drawn by the light, their eyes wide with awe and fear. They watched as the water began to churn, forming patterns that danced upon the waves, circles and spirals, ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with life. And then rising from the center of the glow, they saw it, a great towering wave, cresting high above them, luminous and spectral as if made from pure starlight. Out of the wave emerged the dragon, its form even grander and more terrible than before. It was no longer just a creature of flesh and scale, but a being woven from the very fabric of the sea, its body shimmering with stardust and shadows. Its eyes met Muriel's, filled with the knowing weight of eternity, and the sea itself fell silent in reverence. The dragon's voice echoed through the night, as vast and timeless as the ocean. "You have come far, Captain Muriel. You have given the sea a part of yourself, and in return, it has granted you its wisdom." Muriel stood unflinching before the dragon's gaze, feeling the power of its words flow through her. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "But the price was not only mine to pay. My crew has followed me beyond the edges of any map, beyond the shores of the known world. I owe them more than a life of endless wandering." The dragon regarded her, a glimmer of something like respect in his ancient eyes. "You speak not only as a captain, but as a soul bound by loyalty and love. You have learned well." The water around them began to glow brighter, illuminating the ship and casting strange, beautiful patterns across the crew's faces. The dragon lowered its head, a gesture of both acknowledgement and farewell. "You will return to your world, Captain," it murmured. "But know this, the sea will forever be a part of you. It will call to you in dreams and in the silence between waves. You are bound to it now, as it is bound to you." Miriel felt a pang of bittersweet acceptance. She had known on some level that her journey would end this way, that she would be forever marked by the sea, a part of it forever woven into her soul. But she also knew that she would carry this bond with pride, that it would guide her even as it haunted her. With a slow, deliberate movement, the dragon raised a single vast claw and traced a pattern in the water before her. A symbol, ancient and beautiful, that seemed to pulse with life. As it faded, Miriel felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet but powerful reminder of the bond she had forged, the sacrifice she had made. The dragon's gift, its wisdom, its blessing, would remain within her, guiding her as long as she sailed the seas. And then, as quietly as they'd come, the dragon sank back into the water, its form dissolving into the glow of the waves. The light faded, and the ocean returned to its midnight calm, leaving only the stars to bear witness to what had transpired. Miriel turned to her crew, her heart both heavy and light, her soul forever changed. She saw the wonder in their eyes, the questions they did not dare to ask. And she knew that they, too, had been touched by the dragon's magic, that they would carry this night with them always. With a deep breath, she lifted her chin, her voice steady and resolute. "We sail home," she commanded, her words carrying the weight of both farewell and beginning. The wandering storm set its course, cutting through the night towards familiar shores. But Miriel knew that she would never truly leave the sea, that her heart was forever bound to its depths. The dragon's hoard, the wisdom she had gained, the sacrifice she had made, all of it would remain with her, a haunting, beautiful memory, a piece of the ocean that had become a part of her.